how, like, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much would you say that the pastor's preferences affect the church body's convictions? Like, how close in preferences and personal sin convictions do you think a church body is to their pastor?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the longer the pastor is there, the more the culture he's creating, he and the leadership are creating more of the culture there.
Mm.
But but that's going to happen because they're preaching every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So by default, a culture, and I'm using the word culture because within that culture is beliefs and actions and attitudes and all that are being affected by what the preacher is saying.
Mm.
The values are being affected, right? And so, it's funny. Like my son says that my favorite phrase is make disciples. And
that your favorite
my
phrase?
favorite phrase
Okay.
is that.
Yeah.
And he says, because you say it all the time, Dad.
Mm.
And so what's interesting is I was in a board meeting recently and I asked for the leadership to kind of give me something that they have seen positive going on in the church or in their lives or that kind of thing. And almost every one of them named a discipleship component.
Okay.
And what's happening is in our particular church is this idea of discipleship is that value is the culture is being transformed
Mm-hmm.
because I'm talking about it a lot. So I'm naturally impacting the culture of that church.
Mm-hmm.
And all I'm getting to is, so when the pastor is teaching a lot, especially the same things a lot, it's going to inevitably impact the culture of that church.
So even if you don't mention your preferences on stage, are people going to probably conform to your preferences the longer that you're there?
I don't know if they'd conform to my preferences.
Okay.
And I think we have to be clear like what the preferences are, right? Like my personal preferences for, for example, giving or, like I think that I have to be really clear to teach what is being said biblically about giving without going into a lot of my own personal preferences.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the preferences will inevitably come out at some point in the midst of those teachings. The fact that when I talk about discipleship, my preference is for people to be in a discipleship group of a few people in the same with the same gender. So you got 3 to 5 females in a discipleship group, and so that's a preference of mine. But that's not the only way a discipleship group can work or discipleship can work. It's just my preference, right? And so I think inevitably those things come out. But if I'm not teaching them, I don't know if people are going to just naturally start conforming to certain personal preferences or personal convictions.
Okay.
Because I think there's the preferences of those things, and then there's the preferences of and I think the church culture it really takes on the personality or the preference of the pastor, if you were. If the pastor is really invoking his preference into Sunday mornings need to look like this. These are my preferences for Sunday mornings, for the worship service. And so all of these things start looking the way the pastor would like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even saying that's necessarily all wrong or bad, because they have these convictions and beliefs about what Sunday mornings should entail. But that's why when you go to one church on a Sunday morning versus another church, you can go to completely different services and they could look completely different. And it's because of those preferences being played out. Now, again, those preferences, like on a Sunday morning worship service, there should be a conviction behind the philosophy of the way those services are ran.
Right.
Scripturally, we believe services should look like this. That's fine, and so I do think those things, the things that the pastor is passionate about, like I'm really passionate about outreach. I'm passionate about international missions. So over the course of time, our church will begin to reflect that as well, because I'm going to be talking about it, and I value it so deeply that inevitably it's going to come out. And so I think without question, pastors influence the preferences, quote unquote, of churches, but I would say it's more of like the direction, the mission, the vision of churches. Okay. But I don't think their personal stuff is probably bleeding over as much.